I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, I think some of you guys might find this blog a little boring, but hear me out on this. I don't think I've ever done a blog on getting room measurements. When you list a home, measurements, how we come up with them, the consequences for not having the proper measurements on a home. I think this is the first time I've done a blog on this, so I want to talk to you about it here quickly. Because the real estate board now is starting to really crack down on this. And it's funny because I would have thought, and I think it was more of a concern back 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, before we got into what are currently the digital measurements that we do now. It's night and day compared to just 5 years ago, how we measure a home. But you know, the board has been coming out with some warnings to realtors here recently, saying that you know, some of the most critical data points on the MLS are room measurements and total square footage. In terms of quality of information, it's one of the most susceptible fields for incorrect data to be added. And there can be serious consequences for misrepresenting the size of a property you are marketing or the rooms within it. So, you know, there are serious consequences. If you sell a home and the measurements are not correct, in other words, you say it's 1,000 square feet and it's only 920, well, the first thing they're going to ask is, where did you get your measurements from? We seem to be off by, you seem to be about 80 square feet light. And if the realtor took their own measurements somehow, which in the old days a lot of realtors did, that's why I don't know, I'm surprised at how much of a real problem it is now, but it might be, then you're in some serious trouble here. Because you've misrepresented that property, and of course that seller, you and that seller, could face some legal repercussions on that. So let me give you guys the facts here. There are essentially, when I list a home, there are only really two reliable sources for what the total square footage is of a, let's call it a condo unit. Houses you have to get measured because there is no strata plan filed. So the first source would be the strata plan. So the strata plan is filed by the developer prior to them building the tower. So here's where it gets interesting. If you have a condo that is more than, let's say, 10 years old, 12 years old, there's a good chance that if I were to take what the strata plan says and then get the unit professionally measured, I can usually get a little more square footage out of the condo than what's currently on the strata plan. Because when the developer files a strata plan, there's a variance in the square footage that they are allowed legally. Maybe someone can correct me on this. I think it's something like about 2%, perhaps 3%. Up or down. So in other words, if they say that the unit is in the strata plan 1,000 square feet, they have a variance of, let's say, 20 to 30 square feet above or below that. It might even be a little bit more. Maybe someone can correct me. It might even be as high as 5% variance. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe someone can let me know on that. So that is the one source. If the strata plan says it's 1,000 square foot unit, as a realtor, you're fairly safe in putting that on the MLS listing and disclosing that square footage is from the strata plan. That's pretty reliable. Now, any good realtor like myself is going to go far beyond that. So if I list a condo and it's a 2-bed, 2-bath, strata plan says it's 1,000 square feet, and let's say it's 15 years old. With all my listings, I've always gotten professional measurements done, and there are probably a dozen or so companies in the Lower Mainland that can come out and measure the condo for you. It costs me anywhere from maybe $300 for a 1-bed up to $600 or $700 for a detached house. And they will measure all the rooms individually to come up with a total square footage. And they will also, of course, give me a floor plan with the measurements of each individual room. And I'm amazed at how many realtors list condos and homes that don't have a floor plan. The reason for that usually is they're just cheap. They don't want to spend the $300, $400, $500, $600 to get it done. Now, I can't think of a reason. You've got to be out of your mind not to. And here's the reason why. Usually on an older strata, let's call it 10 years older or older, pretty much, I would say 95% of the time on these older strata, when I get it professionally measured, I can usually get more square footage than what's on the strata plan. Sometimes a fair bit more. Sometimes if the strata plan reads 1,000 square feet and it's a 15-year-old strata, I'll get it professionally measured and I can get 1,045 square feet, which makes a huge difference. Every square inch, every square foot counts. And if you're selling instead of selling 1,000 square foot unit, I can honestly put in there that this unit was professionally measured at 1,045. Now here's where it gets a little weird, and I think you guys are going to find this interesting. It has shifted now. Anything again over 10, 12, 15 years old, 20, 30-year-old stratas, I can almost 100%, when I get it professionally measured, I'm getting more square footage than what is on the strata plan. However, with younger stratas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old stratas, not all the time, but about 30% of the time, I would have to say right now, when I go to measure this professionally, if it says it's 1,000 square feet, all I can get is 990 out of this. And that tells you a lot about where we at with new construction, pre-sale condos, and all that other good stuff. Now, it's legal. Again, in the disclosure statement, with that strata plan, again, that developer has a variance in there because things can change with construction. Wall thickness, and there's a myriad of things. They have to move this, move that. A staircase has to be moved. Elevator shaft has to be moved over 5 inches, whatever. These things can change as things go along. So they do have a variance there. And it's something like, again, plus or minus something like 2 to 3%. Where it could get into trouble is if they say on the strata plan it's 1,000 square feet, you get it measured out at 900, now you do have a case against that developer. It gets beyond, that's 10%, which is way beyond the variance that they're allowed. So it's kind of funny. These days, on newer condos, what I'll do, and what a lot of realtors will do, if I take it a newer condo and I can't measure it out, it says on the strata plan it's 1,000 square feet and I can only get 995. So yeah. I mean, it happens. Now, again, it's usually on newer condos, on anything over about 10 or 15 years old. It tends to be the older it is, the more square footage I get. These developers in the old days were much more conservative, is what I'm saying, on the square footage. These days, not all the time. Sometimes I just listed one out in Brentwood not long ago, and I had a new one I just listed out in Richmond, relatively newer condo, and I was able to squeak out just a few extra square feet out of the measurements. So, measurements, you always, again, if you're listing your home, you should be asking your realtor, you are going to get this professionally measured and get a floor plan. If they hum and haw about that, find another realtor. You want to have that. You want a floor plan. You want to get the square footage measured by a professional measurement company, a third party. Because by doing that, you are eliminating, or you're getting rid of any risk there. That measurement company is now doing the measurements for you, and you're not doing them. It's by a third party there. Although I think if you really dig a little deeper, if that measurements were way off still by the third party measurement company you still could be in trouble. So you got to make sure. But that's, I don't think, can happen anymore. In the early days of me listing homes, especially detached homes, I used to use, and I think they're still in business, use a company called Measure Masters. And they used to, I'm an old timer, they used to come out with tape measures, folks. And I can remember listing a 2,500 square foot home back 15 years ago. And it would take 3, 4, 5 hours. 2 of them would spend half a day in there measuring. Condo, 1,000 square foot condo 15 years ago would take a couple of hours to measure. It was old school. Then I guess about 10 years ago, things switched to digital measurements where they would have a digital tool with, lasers and things. And that cut the time down drastically. Now, in the last few years, we've had a huge jump in technology. So I don't know if any of you guys have seen how our homes are measured now. The high quality measurement companies I use, they use about a $15,000 body mount machine. They roll up with a rolling suitcase that they open up, and it's like a shoulder harness with like a halo that goes up. These things are, I think, are made by like Siemens. They're like a German company that make these. They're expensive. It's about a $12,000 or $15,000 unit. They put this halo on, and then they walk into the rooms. They turn. A typical 1-bedroom condo now to measure 10 minutes. A 2-bedroom, maybe 15 minutes. I just had a 3,000 square foot house measured in about 45 minutes, and they are deadly accurate. They're using, I don't know what it is, GPS, laser, it's high-tech stuff, and it's all downloaded to an iPad, and the next day they send me the measurements, and they are extremely accurate. So measurements have taken a big leap forward here, but when you're listing a home, if you're a realtor, if it's a condo, you should always be doing measurements to try and get every square inch out of it. Usually, if it's an older strata, as I say, the square footage is measured is usually better than what is on the strata plan. But you do not want to be doing your own measurements. I don't know how many realtors do that anymore. I don't think many, I hope, because it's risky. But I do see a lot of realtors that just simply take the measurements off the strata plan. And I think you're doing your seller a disservice there, especially on most strata, because you could probably get a little extra square footage by measuring it and paying that $300 or $400. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, thanks for watching. See you next week.